Okay, so let's start building our hello world program using PHP. So before that, if you head over to the material, go to setting up the environment folder. Here you will find examples and exercises. Okay, and then there's a practical test. So what we are doing now is basically an example. Example is something I'm going to show you. Exercise is what I want you to try. Okay, so let's head over to the example folder. When you open this folder, you'll always find these two files. One is the deliverables and another is logical flow of examples. If you open these two files, this is basically the logical flow of how and what tags we're going to see as part of the example. And deliverables is the files that I'll create, and I'll try to explain you how these things are done. And these are the files will be available in the after folder. These are the same files, these are deliverables, and you can refer back to these files with whatever example I'm going to show you here. So this way, even after you finish the course, or you have some clarification required maybe on semicolon, you can come back to this material and then you can refer back to the exact code and then you can reuse it. Okay, so what I want you to do is open this logical flow of example and open this deliverable. So as and when I'm doing it, you can just see what I'm doing first, then you can try out the same example. And if there's something you cannot get what I'm doing, you can always refer back to the after folder. This has the code that has been shown in this demo. Okay, so let's go ahead and create one by one all these examples. Okay, so let's start developing the programs. So before that, we'll open the deliverables file. Okay, this is a good reference for us to see what we are doing and what we want to achieve after this example. Okay, we'll be creating all these files, and this is the logical flow. This is how we're gonna build our examples. So let's open our Sublime and also make sure the amps is running. Okay, make sure it is. When you right click, it should be in the start mode, so you can able to restart and stop, and this option should be enabled for you. Okay, the first file that we're going to create is called as hello world.php. Okay, so before that, I want to show you something. I want to show you where you're going to save these files. Okay, so let's look at those configuration first. So in the D colon or C colon we have installed amps. Open the folder, go to www folder. In this I'm going to create one folder called hello world. Okay, and in this I'm going to place all my files. So how to access this folder, I'll show you once we write the file. So let's create a new file. Let's save this in this hello world program. Okay, and I'm going to call it as hello world.php. Okay, so we have our files here, hello world.php. Okay, let's do our examples. So I make sure we see all these things what we are developing. Okay, so the first thing we're going to develop is display hello world with PHP tags. So we have understood that the opening tag should be less than $PHP, and the ending tag is basically greater than symbol. So anything that you write inside this block is called as PHP code, and anything that you write outside, the interpreter will not take this code and will not interpret it. So the first thing is, how do you display hello world? So we have a function called echo. You can say hello world, and then you will end with a semicolon. Okay, so I have used single quotes. You can also use double quotes. Okay, it doesn't really matter if it's single quote or double quote. Okay, so save this. So how to execute this code now? Because you have amps installed now, so and you are able to access the amps as well. So open the browser, and what I want to do is I want to execute this code. So before that, what we can do, we can check localhost slash the folder name hello world slash hello world.php. Okay, there it is. That's the text that is being printed. Okay, couple of things here I want you to understand. First, in the URL we have given the folder name. That folder name is nothing but this folder name, which is under the www folder. So any folder that you create here, you just have to say localhost slash and that folder name slash the file name. You cannot skip the file name like this and say okay search and then show me, it's going to error out. You have to type in the file name, that is .php, and once you type that, whatever is the content of that PHP, it is interpreted, right? The text is interpreted and it is displayed onto the browser. So that's how the PHP will display a content, and this is happening at the AMP server. So AMP has PHP installed. So this PHP will convert this piece of code as an text onto the browser. So if you look at the code, there's a hello world and all these tags are not visible. The echo is not visible. It's basically converted into a HTML text, right? And what happens, just play around with it. What happens if I place outside the block? What will happen? Any wild guesses? What do you think what will happen now if I place the function outside the PHP code? So let's execute this and you're gonna see the code here, because PHP doesn't really care what's outside the closing tag. It only want to know what is inside the PHP code, and then it only executes and interprets the code that is inside the PHP. Okay, that's why whenever you place anything outside your closing tag, will automatically display in the output. Okay, so I'm going to remove this. Okay, this will be our first example and first deliverable to print hello world onto a web page. And there are two ways you can use double quote and single quote. Okay, so let's move on. Next, we'll create hello world with a print function. Okay, I'm going to copy this, go to Sublime, say file new, save this file. I'm going to write the same thing, PHP opening tag, closing tag, and instead of echo, I'll do the same thing. And single quote. Okay, nothing fancy here. I have just created a file with hello world with print.php. Instead of echo, I'm using the print function and everything remains the same. So let's execute that file now. Okay, the output is gonna be same. So I'll create one more tab. Okay, that's our first example, hello world.php. The second example is hello world with print.php. Next, we will create a hello world without an echo. So we will not use echo or print, but we will print hello world. Okay, so create a new file, new file, save the file, put the file name. Okay, so there is a short notation for it, less than question mark is equal to, and then you can start putting the hello world here. This less than question mark is equal to is actually equal to, instead of writing less than question mark PHP echo, right, what we have done is we have replaced this with this short notation, and whatever you're gonna write after it will be directly printed. So echo is already embedded here, and that echo will display this text. It's the same thing. You can use single quote now. Okay, and see here I'm not putting a semicolon, is also fine. You can put a semicolon, is also fine. So let's execute hello world without echo.php. So I'll copy this file name, localhost. Okay, it shows the same output, hello world and hello world. So we have seen display hello world with PHP tags. We have seen display hello world with print. We have replaced the opening tag with an short notation. So let's play around by removing some semicolons and try to execute that code. So it will be interesting to see when to use semicolon and when not to use a semicolon. So I'll create one more file here. File, new file. Let me save this file. Okay, so let's try to play around with the semicolons. So first example, we'll try to print hello world. And this time I will not put the semicolon, and I'll see what will happen. I'll use the same thing for single quotes. And I'll use the same method then I'm gonna say semicolon here, then I'll remove the semicolon here. Okay, so if you notice I'm just playing around with semicolons. I did not put semicolon here, not here, even here I didn't put, but in the second line I put, then I removed the semicolon here. The interesting thing is if you remove the semicolon, this one, it'll error out. I'm going to show you that. So let's execute this program. Then I'm going to play around with semicolons. So let's open that file name. Okay, so we have all these hello worlds here. If you remove this semicolon, you'll see an error stating, something is missing in the code, which is obviously a semicolon. The reason behind is it's okay to have in one line, the last line you should not have the semicolon. That is the rule. Means this is the last line, this is not the last line. So this should have a semicolon. So it's a tricky one. Let's say someone show you this code and say, guess what's the output? The output is an error because this line doesn't have a semicolon, as this line is not the last line. If you have the semicolon here, this is the last line, then it's perfectly fine. And if this is the last line, then you don't need a semicolon. And these lines basically are individual lines, right? This line has nothing to do with this line. So this is an opening tag and a closing tag. So this becomes the last line for this opening and closing tag. Okay, so understand how semicolon works. You can give semicolons to everything. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really care whether you're using semicolon or not. You're removing the semicolon, right? The rule here is the last line should not have semicolons. It's okay to ignore it. Okay, so that's on the semicolon. So next, let's show all the possible ways to display text. Okay, so we can try this out, but I'm going to show you one example here, then you can go ahead and do the examples. So we're going to create one more file, and then we're going to use both the notation. I'm going to use the PHP notation first. This we have learned of opening and closing tag. The first function we learned is hello, and using hello we can use double quote or single quote, doesn't matter. Welcome to PHP. Close it with a semicolon because I'm going to write one more line. Here you can say excited to learn this new language. You can ignore the semicolon here because it's going to be a last line. I'm not going to put semicolon here. Then I'm going to use a short notation here, and I'm going to say PHP is interesting. And you can use the same thing. use it with single quotes. Okay, and you can try out with a semicolon as well, doesn't really hurt. And then you have all the examples here. You have echo, you have your opening tag and a closing tag, you have your echo function here, you have your print function here. Echo function ends with semicolon, print doesn't need because the last line. Then you have short notation which already have echo embedded in it. You don't have to end with a semicolon, and you can use single quote and a double quote. So let's execute this program just to verify it has no issues. Right, so everything works perfectly, no issues at all. So this is how you basically use echo and print and opening tag and closing tag and short notation to print text onto the browser. Okay, so before we close, I just want to let you know this code will be available part of your material. And if you head back to the material, which is under your materials folder, go to settings, setting up the environment, go example 1. After files is all the same files that I've shown here. Okay, you can use it for your exercise, and all these 2 files, derivables and basically logical flow of example, is already available for you to practice. Okay, that's all for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one.